Well, hello there. This is Father Bob Wiseman. I'm a member of the Catholic community here in Bennington and North Bennington, Sacred Heart St. Francis Catholic Church and St. John the Baptist Catholic Church. I'm here with companion on the journey, Father Hugh Cleary. He works with me. We're both Holy Cross priests working in the Bennington area. We're also here with Deacon Phil Lawson from the Diocese of Burlington. He's been with us for the last 2 days, helping us with a parish mission. I thought I'd turn it over to Phil first and have us give an overview of what the Diocesan Synods all about, followed by our attempt here on the local level to talk about evangelization. So, Phil, please tell us.
Thanks, Father Bob. So as you probably heard, the Bishop Coyne has called for the first Diocesan Synod in about 60 years here in the Diocese of Burlington, and he's been here about 3 years. And really, he's calling the Synod to hear from the people of God, hear from people around the state, and map out a way forward for our Catholic faith, for our Catholic Church here in Vermont, the pastoral level, the structural level, and the evangelization level. And so the preliminary process has taken place. The formal synodal sessions will take place in the fall, in which there'll be delegates from every parish. But as Bishop has made very clear, he wants to listen to everybody. And so there were listening sessions held in parishes throughout the state. There was an online form for listening sessions, for submitting responses, as well as people could email or send in letters. And that results in 300 some pages of documentation of responses. Hearing from people what their concerns are, what the church is doing well, what we can be doing better, and then what we're not doing that we should be doing. So it's been a fascinating process. Bishop's been very clear he doesn't want to direct the process or have an agenda. He just wants to hear from the people of God, and then we'll see where the Lord takes us here in Vermont going forward, which is really kind of an exciting process.
It's very exciting. We've already had our listening sessions in Bennington, North Bennington. We got some very good feedback. In the meantime, we as a local parish are trying to look at the whole concept of evangelization, how we reach out to people who are Catholic, who for whatever reason stepped away from the church, or people who would like to think about joining the church. And Father Hugh has helped in this process a lot. He's helped write a prayer that we'll show you at the very end of this session. You can look at and pray, which we'll be praying during this coming year too, in conjunction with the Diocesan Synod prayer. So Hugh, would you give them a little overview of what we've been doing locally with the evangelization?
Sure. Well, the most important thing to say, first of all, is that we have a great love for Jesus as our Savior, and He is the incarnation of God's love, and it is His way of life that brings us into the meaning and purpose of our existence, trying to live that love with a great deal of passion and a great deal of care and compassion for all the people around us. And with that said, one of the great sadnesses I think that we have is that in many ways in this age of secularization, more and more people have opted out of really celebrating their faith within the community of the church. We have a lot of empty pews as compared to maybe 30 years ago. And there are many, many reasons for that. And in conversations with Deacon Phil, for example, he's listed a number of them. And it's really wonderful that the bishop wants to take the time now to listen to everybody as to why we think, as the church in Vermont, that maybe the pews are empty, and maybe why the church isn't as vibrant as it was in the past. And where are people in their individual lives and in their life as a community, and especially in their lives as their family. We know that there are many, many challenges in today's world, and obviously we believers think that Christ's love is the best way that we can approach all of these challenges of life, that His love is the way that is going to touch our hearts in the most meaningful way, that will allow us to touch each other's hearts, and that we will find the great joy of living in that sense. So we really are excited about undertaking this evangelization, just to welcome people home again, to see how we can find our love with God renewed and refreshed, and our love with one another in that same way.
Very good. Just a point of information, a little history. there were two Catholic churches in Bennington, Sacred Heart, St. Francis, and Sacred Heart, and then merged with St. Francis in 1995. And before that, there were also a Catholic college in town, St. Joseph College, a Catholic high school, Bennington Catholic High School, which closed in 1967, and we had two Catholic grade schools. At this point, we only have one Catholic grade school, a wonderful beacon of hope for the Catholics of this local community. Deacon Phil was there at school this morning, and I think every week on Friday we have a mass for our students, and family members are also invited. We've been baptizing some students at the school. So for hope, for me, I know for Father Hugh and for a lot of us, is this: the young people are bringing some families back to church. So we're really very excited about that. But we also want to reach out to those people for whatever reason may have decided, for whatever reason, to step back from the church activity. Unfortunately, we have a number of funerals in which we invite a lot of people to come to, but we invite them back, and for whatever reason, they find themselves not able to, for whatever reason, to step back. So we've had some outreach through some meetings, and hopefully through this mission that Phil has been conducting. It concludes on Monday night. That will get some excitement about who we are as church and reach out beyond that. Any thoughts?
It's really an opportunity. Again, as Father Hugh was talking about, it starts with us. The early Christians, how did they evangelize? They were set on fire by Christ's love, that encounter with Christ. And then they just naturally wanted to share that. I like to use the analogy as when somebody gets proposed to, when you get engaged, do you keep it to yourself? No, you shout it from the rooftops, whether people want to hear it or not. You can't help but share that joy because it's in you. And it's not in an obnoxious way, it's a beautiful way, because love by its nature always seeks to go beyond itself. And so for the Christian to have encountered Christ, encountered the love of Christ, it naturally goes out beyond ourselves. Sometimes in our culture, or perhaps it's in our New England pedigree, we're a little more stolid or stoic. But Mother Teresa said, "Joy is the net that catches souls." And you think back to, many of you have seen a picture or images of Mother Teresa. Did you ever see her not smiling? And then when she would look at what she was doing with her life and how she was touching the poorest of the poor, those who had been rejected by everybody, it was not an easy existence for her or for her work. But she brought the light of Christ to that because she saw Christ present. And so the purpose of these parish missions and evangelization is to really bring to the forefront the joy that we are called to have, and then to offer that to the world. Because you read the newspapers, we could use a little bit more joy. We could use a little bit more peace in our world. And that's the Christian contribution to the world.
And I would say, in light of that, for me, one of the great inspirations I take in life is from the people in the pew, so to speak, the community. I find the community here, both in North Bennington and Bennington itself, to be very inspiring. People live really heroic lives of virtue. They're good. They make lots of sacrifices for their families. They are people who really go the distance in sharing the goodness of their lives with others. And they all make me want to be a better priest. And I feel very, very blessed to be here at St. John the Baptist Parish and Sacred Heart Parish, St. Francis de Sales Parish. It's a great, great blessing for me.
It's been a real gift for me, too, to meet some great people. Both Hugh and I were what they call novices in our religious order here for a year. We lived on the Son of Mount Anthony. We had a farm. We milked cows. Well, he fed chickens. I didn't have any chickens in my time, but we had horses, and we prayed, and we got to know better what we were about. So it's kind of somewhat of a homecoming for me to come back and be a part of this faith community as hopefully a leader and to help people who are Catholic or people thinking about becoming Catholic again to connect. So I hope people journey with them to find what's right for them.
Right, and that's whole, Pope Francis has used a term called accompaniment over and over, how we accompany each other on this journey toward God. And really, for those who are not in the pews, there's something lacking. The church is lacking because they're not with us. Yeah, right. We are enriched when we're all in this together, warts and all, and as Francis, the vicissitudes of life. We know none of us are perfect, but we're journeying toward God together and we strengthen each other for that journey. And that's, as you said, with your congregation and the people here at Bennington, that's a great blessing because we enrich each other and we watch each other and we help each other. And how do they describe the early Christians? See how they love each other, you know, and that's what we're called to do as a people of faith.
In light of that, I think all of our recent popes, in many ways, have been great shepherds for us and holy people, wonderful saints, and St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and now Pope Francis. All of them have spoken about this evangelization manner. It's not about necessarily teaching the doctrine of the church right now. It's really inspiring people through the example of our lives to let them catch a glimpse of the joy in our community. And as you said, see how they love one another. And I would say, truly, our community is really, the people do love one another. They take good care of one another. And they love God. And God really is the passion of their lives. And it's the inspiration for everything that they do.
Go ahead. No.
There's
You're up.
I gave a talk to a group of grandmas some time ago, and sometimes older folks think they can't connect with the younger generation, and because they're not as digitally savvy per se. And I said,
I'm one of those.
Yeah. but I said, well, you also have a great advantage because when your grandchild is over at your house, your granddaughter, etc., you know, you're not the one who's constantly being distracted by the technology. When your grandchild is sitting in your presence, they have your full attention. Where else do they go that happens? You know, we're always distracted by this, by this, by this. You're there to look them in the eye, to listen to hear their story. And that's a great benefit and a great blessing. I think it's a place our church has to be as well. It can be there where you can actually hear the whole person. You're not just a number, you're not just a Facebook post, but you're a human person with a dignity, and I'm going to listen to your story and hear you.
It's interesting. A few years ago, I did a class up at Southern Vermont College, and 2 sessions where I talked about what the church is doing, who we are as a religious order, the Holy Cross Order, at the college, which is what used to be our novitiate. So they got to hear my story about when I lived on the farm. And then the next day we came down to our church. We walked through the church, and a lot of these students said, "Oh, my grandmother has one of those," which is a statue. "My granddad has one of those," but there's not in their own home today. So we kind of skipped the generation for people to be connected with church. And now some of our young people, I hope we can connect with them and give them a place they can call home, where we've got a wonderful history as church of caring for people. You know, our church started the hospital system in this country, started basically the private school system in this country. So we've done a wonderful group of service things for our not only Catholics but beyond the Catholic community. At our church, both places, we have a wonderful food pantry. Reach out to the local people. As you know so well, the Bennington County area has a terrible problem with poverty, and I think we're reaching out in a very prayerful way and a very caring way for those who need our help for food.
It can be, now I'm an optimist by nature, so I'll give you that digression or caveat, but we can be tempted to despair a little bit when we see the numbers. But if you look at historically, the relationship of people with God has always gone up and down. You look at the people of Israel in the Old Testament, they were right with God and then they fell away. And then they got back right with God and then they fell away. You know, and even the church in America or the church Christianity for the last 2,000 years, it's gone in waves. I'll quote Mother Teresa, God calls us to be faithful, not successful. So the question is, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? And no, we're not happy that things aren't where they could be, but if we're faithful, we'll get back to where we need to be.
That's really true. I think, as we mentioned, that it's really the inspiration of our lives and our care for one another and our love for God that will really draw people once again into their own heart. I always like the way that Pope Benedict XVI would talk about heaven. He would say, we can't think of heaven as a physical location, as someplace up in the sky, you know, beyond the clouds, but we can think of heaven as right in our own hearts. And it's the place where God lives, it's the place where we live, it's the place where the communion of saints lives. And the whole world can be really in our own hearts, and in that communion, it overflows into the larger world. So there's always this give and take of what the world is doing to our heart and what our heart is doing to the world. And we pray that really the truth of love will have the last word. And as we're going to celebrate Easter soon, it's the love that conquers our despair. It's the love that conquers all of our fears. It's the love that conquers even death itself.
You mentioned the heart. That question actually came up at the school when I was visiting with the children this morning. It says, well, what place does religion have in my life? What place should religion have in our life? And I quoted Blaise Pascal, who's a French mathematician, Catholic priest for about 150 years ago or so. But he said, all of us have a God-shaped hole in our heart. And it's a hole that only, because God's shaped, that only God can fill. And we, as humans, we try to fill that hole with all sorts of things, be it success, be it relationships, be it whatever, money, power, whatever the case may be. But all of those things ultimately leave us a little bit empty, a little bit short. They can't lead to the fullness. They can bring us happiness. They're not as bad things, but they don't lead to the fullness of joy that we're meant for. And so we're always looking for something more. And so what faith does, what Christ did, or what God did, he made us with a God-shaped hole that only God can fill. And the nice thing is, that's free. There's no cost to it. And it's a gift from God. But just to be open to that. And it says, faith will bring you that fullness of purpose and mission of joy that all of us want. We're not quite sure how to get there, because it's a gift from God. And all we have to do is receive it. And that's the gift of faith and God's gift to us.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in our society, we fill it with a lot of noise. I think you used the example of traveling without a radio on for hours, and how prayerful it was. I think sometimes we do those sort of things to avoid dealing with who we are. We create noise around us so we can live without thinking about who we are. So maybe for us Catholics, we talk about the three programs of almsgiving, prayer, and fasting, very much. I was going to.
We got each other's back.
Well, we're here. We're working together on this one. So this, how we fast. Well, how we not only fast from the candies we thought was the big deal when I was a kid, but really fasting from maybe some noise, or fasting so we can really hear the Lord speak to our hearts. That's waiting for us.
I'll never forget. I was many years ago. I was a supervisor at Osco Drug. It was in my college days. And a young lady, she's about 16, 17 years old, and during the part-time shifts, you get a 15-minute break. And typically the young people would go downstairs and just hang on the break for 15 minutes. She would never do that. She would always hang out at the front counter. And I asked her, which was fine. I said, why don't you ever go take your break? And this young lady was doing some things that weren't leading her to where she needed to be. And I knew a little bit about that. And she shared with me, says, it's too quiet in the break room. I said, oh, and she says, when it's too quiet, I start to think. And I start to get uncomfortable. Well, that was God trying to speak to her, trying to get her to kind of get her back on the path she wanted to. But instead of the noise, the silence scared her, and so she went to the comfort of noise so she wouldn't have to deal with that. But that didn't solve the problem. It just exacerbated it. Because God speaks how? As he speaks to Elijah in the Old Testament, in the still small voice, almost a whisper. But we try and do this sometimes.
So we quiet ourselves down here for a few minutes. I'm glad you're hopefully watching us, and it might find an occasion when you would like to hear some quiet time, come and spend some time in our chapels. The chapels are always open during the daytime, place to come, or just sit outside. Today was a beautiful day. I went up for a bike ride just to hear the breeze hit through my ears, through my helmet. So I invite you to find some quiet time, especially during this Lenten period, to reflect on how God fills your heart, fills your life, gives you hope for the future. So we invite anyone who may be thinking about attending church, either a Catholic church where you certainly the doors are always open, welcoming you, or another place where you find prayer would fit your life. There's a lot of places of worship in this community, so I hope you reach out and touch someone in those places that will help you in your faith journey. So any final words, either Phil or Hugh?
Just that we always keep everybody in the community in our prayers.
That's right.
And we hope that through those prayers we will strengthen one another.
Yeah. Well, thank you for watching and listening. And at the end, we'll have the prayer we call the Evangelization Prayer, which actually Father Hugh was instrumental in writing for our local community. Talk about the people who may have stepped away for a while. We'll pray for you and hope you come and join us someday. Thank you very much. God bless.